Hello, zoology students. Here are the notes on the characteristics of life that we covered in class today. To start out with, we were talking about what it means for an organism to be alive. What do organisms that are alive have to be able to do? And this is a list of those items. One thing that they have to be able to do or be true of them is that they're made of one or more cells. If you remember back to the cell theory, the cell theory was something you learned about in biology class. And the cell theory has three parts to it. The first part is that all living things are made of one or more cells. Okay? So, by definition, to be a living thing, you have to have at least one cell. Also, cells are the basic unit of structure and function in living organisms. So, your heart, for example, does what it does because it's made up of heart cells, cardiac cells that are able to contract, coordinated with other cells to create the pumping that pumps the blood through your body. And the last thing is that all cells come from other cells. Okay? So they are a major part of reproduction. Every one of us started out as a single cell, and the processes of reproduction all involve copying that cell or taking the DNA from the cell in some way and sharing it. Okay? Living things also display organization. And if you think about it, even if we look at a single cell organism, even a single celled organism has molecules combined to form organelles. Okay. In complex organisms, like yourself, cells combine to form tissues, which form organs, which form organ systems. So all of these things are made up of simpler parts combined together. And that's what we mean by organization. Okay? Simpler parts. Okay. Growth and development. If you think about it, when you were 5 years old, you were smaller than you are now, and some things have happened since then that have led to what you call growth. Okay, growth, if we were to put you on a scale and measure you, is the addition of mass. Okay, you have more atoms and molecules than you used to. Once again, in a single-celled organism, you have a small cell after cell division, and then it adds more atoms and molecules. Okay. cells until it's big enough to divide again. And in our case, we all began as one cell. And that cell divided, and then those cells divided until we now are made of tens of trillions of cells. Okay? So you added mass by adding more cells. And that's true of complex organisms. Imagine how many cells are in a organism like an elephant or a whale or something like that. Lots and lots of cells. Okay? Things that are alive reproduce. Even single-cell organisms have to reproduce. Separate that out there. Pick a color. They go through some variation of mitosis. It's really a form of asexual reproduction. And that produces two cells with the same genetic material as the parent cell. Now, for you do that also, but after your cells divide, they don't separate. That's how you grow. You add those. So I guess in some ways we could think of that as a reproduction, but to reproduce more complex organisms completely, many of them use sexual reproduction. And that involves cells also. Okay, so the cells copy DNA, and then they divide it in extra time. To make gametes. Gametes are the science word for eggs and sperm. Okay. Once combined, an egg and a sperm produce the first cell of the next organism. So once again, you started as a single cell. We all started as a single cell, and cell division over and over again led to you being to your growth. Reproduction involved producing these half-size cells, having half the normal number of DNA, and then once combined together, they give you all the DNA that you need for a single organism. Responding to stimuli, if you think of something like, I guess my favorite example is chocolate chip cookies. I enjoy chocolate chip cookies, and when I smell chocolate chip cookies, I try to go find them and eat them. Smell, that sense of smell, is a stimulus, and what it actually is it is molecules, chemicals carried in the air that your nose or the parts of your sensory system in your nose can detect, and it sends a message to your brain. Okay? So molecules in the air. And it could be a food source, in which case you're going to go toward it. Or it could be a predator. You know, if you smelled a grizzly bear, I probably wouldn't go toward it, at least not if I was close enough to smell it. And in that case, I would move away from it. And that happens at a very basic level uh, for living things. And some of the simple organisms that we're going to be learning about respond to their environment in that way. They can detect molecules and they move toward or away from those molecules depending upon whether those are food molecules or predator molecules and that kind of thing. Okay. Also, light energy is a stimulus, and we have complex eyes that allow us to see an image, but many organisms can only detect light or dark. Okay? But that can be useful for them. They can move toward it or move away from it, depending upon what their needs are. Some organisms move toward the light because perhaps they are looking for food sources that are using the light, or they have a symbiotic relationship with algae in their cells that need light, or maybe they move away from it to try to stay in a place where their predators um, won't find them. Okay, some other examples of stimuli. Um, Sound is detecting vibrations, and that can be in the air, can be in water, can actually be in solids. Okay? So those are just three examples of stimuli that organisms might detect and respond to in some way. Um, Living organisms require energy. It takes energy to break apart food molecules, molecules apart. Okay? It takes energy to make new cells, for example. Um, takes energy to move, takes energy for nerve cells to work, all those kinds of things. So organisms need energy for lots and lots of things. Even plants use energy just to pump um, elements, molecules, things like sodium and nitrogen and things like that into and out of the plant. Okay. All right, maintains homeostasis. We talked about all these things that they need. Maintaining homeostasis is the kind of the act of getting the things that they need and the act of getting rid of the waste that they don't. For example, your cells all release energy from glucose, so they need glucose and they need oxygen to do that. But when they're done, they have produced carbon dioxide, which is a waste product and gets in the way. Too much of it can poison the cell. So you have a complex body system, your circulatory system and your respiratory system, that get rid of those things. Um, so even single-celled organisms have to take in materials that they need from water and things like that, and they have to get rid of wastes. So some organisms, some animals we're going to study do this in very, very simple ways Others have much more complex systems. Okay, so we were talking about the DNA being passed from generation to generation. During reproduction, mutations can happen in that. Okay? They lead to variation. Okay? And that is kind of the fuel for natural selection and evolution. So what we're thinking is that all of these traits the living organism shows have developed through evolution over time. That's how they've come about. So those are 8 things that all living things are true about all living things, or things they have to do. They're made of one or more cells. Those cells and the organisms themselves display organization. They grow and develop. By the way, development is a predictable pattern of growth, cells developing in certain ways at certain times. They reproduce. They copy their DNA, pass the DNA on to new cells or into to gametes that are passed on to form the next offspring. They respond to stimuli, to chemicals in the air, to light, to sound, a number of different things that they can respond to. It requires energy. Even plants use energy. There's energy being used in the cells, moving things around inside the cells. There are actually little protein motors in the cell that are able to move things around. Those require energy. Maintaining homeostasis, getting rid of waste products that are produced by releasing energy, for example, or building new cell parts, and taking in the necessary materials to do those things. And then lastly, all of these characteristics have evolved over time through that process of the DNA being passed from generation to generation, picking up mutations along the line, and natural selection selecting for beneficial mutations. All right.